So how can we combine both of these together? We can do that with a layered texture. So over here on the left, I'm just looking for a layered texture. Under other textures, I'm just going to click it, and it puts this layered texture node in our work area. Alright, if I click on this or double click, you can see the attributes for it. This is pretty simple once you kind of understand it. We can create a lot of different layers, and it treats it as one layer. So if I click in this area here, it creates another layer, another layer, another layer, and so forth. If I want to get rid of layers, I can click on the little X underneath it. If I want to edit any one of these layers, I can click on that layer, and now I can change the color if I want to. I can click on this one over here, change the color for that one if I want it. So you can even use textures, so I could take this color and I could add a texture to it. So this is just a way where you can combine a bunch of different layers together, and then it comes out as one layer. Alright, but we don't need all these. I think the easiest way to explain this will be to go ahead and create just two layers. We can do it with one, but for simplicity's sake, I'm going to use two. I think it might be a little simpler. Alright, on this first layer we want our fractal bump, and on this other layer we want our brick, our grooves bump, and then we want both those to come out together as one bump. Alright, so this fractal I'm going to put on this first one right here. So I'm going to middle mouse drag our fractal texture and drop it where this color is. I can drop it anywhere on there, I think. I just have a habit of dropping on the button. And now fractal is on there. So if we go ahead and connect, we can go ahead and connect this layered texture node to our bump. So default. Alright, so we just added a fractal to it. So if we look at our wall, you can see our fractal bump is on there. See if I can get all this so you can see it all. Alright, so there's our wall right there in between. Okay, we've got our fractal connected. Now let's connect. Okay, let's see. This is where I have difficulty. um, if you're new to alpha maps, and I know a lot of you already understand this and y'all are like blah blah blah, but for those who are really trying to understand all this, an alpha map is basically kind of like almost like an invisibility map. It's a map saying where you want something to be invisible. And I guess the easiest way I can explain it is just to kind of picture a window that's been really fogged up or frosted up, and you can't really see through it. But if you were to go up to it and just take a finger and swipe your finger across it, then where you swipe your finger, you'd be able to see through the window. And that's kind of how an alpha map works. So if we were to place this brick texture that we did, and we were to place it as an alpha map or alpha mask on this fractal, then we would be able to see the fractal everywhere there's white, but everywhere we got black lines, it would block out, it would be invisible on this fractal. You would kind of see through it. It's like wiping our fingers across there. So these black lines are kind of representing someone wiping their fingers across this fractal and just creating some invisible areas, sort of. I guess that's the easiest way to explain it. Alright, so what we want to do is we want a black and white image that has this fractal on there and black lines. So what we're going to do is, hopefully just doing this will make sense to you. Let's click on our layer texture node. On this fractal, I'll make sure it's selected, and I'm going to take this brick bump and I'm going to drag it and I'm going to drop it right here on the alpha. So we drop the fractal texture on the color and we drop the brick bump on the alpha. Okay, now this second layer is green. So if you look up here at this texture sample, you can see that this green is bleeding through, and it's kind of hard to tell, but it's only bleeding through where the black lines on the brick is. Because when we put this brick texture on this fractal layer, it made those black lines, it made those areas invisible, so we're actually looking through this layer where those black lines were, and we're seeing the green underneath. Alright, so we want our bump map to be black and white, not black, white, and green. So I'm going to change this green layer. I'm just going to change it to black. and click accept. So now if you look at our texture sample, we've got our fractal and we've got our black lines on there for our um, grooves. Now if you look at our wall, you can see now that it looks a lot better. We've got our bricks are roughed up, and we've got our grooves where the separating all the bricks. So the bricks kind of pop out now. They all look 3D. So a lot better. Alright, just to explain this one more time. In this layer texture node, we created two layers. We've got one layer that we use for the fractal, and then we just needed some black lines on there with that fractal, and the way we did it was we just put a black layer underneath it, and then we just cut out a bunch of lines so we could see through the fractal and see the black underneath. And we did that by using an alpha map, and the alpha map that we used was our brick layer texture. So I hope that wasn't confusing. If you have questions, feel free to go ahead and post your questions, and we'll do our best to get back with you. Alright, let's go ahead and kind of do a test render, because there is one more thing we'll have to do, I think. But let's go ahead and do a test render and see if this works. If it doesn't work, then we'll have to look at the alpha to luminance on our alpha layer. But I don't want to make this any more confusing. Let's change our quality to production, since this is just a single object. And that'll work. I'm going to change the background of my camera to white. So camera attribute editor, environment, I'm just going to change the white. Or maybe just do it gray this time. Alright, let's do a little test render. See what happens. Alright, so there is our texture. We've got our brick wall, and it's roughed up, and we've got some grooves on there, so not bad. It looks a whole lot better, a lot more realistic than our initial texture. Alright, I'm going to save this picture. Let's go back in here. Now, I said we could do this with one layer on that texture node, so let's double click our layer texture, and here's our two layers. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and delete this black layer. Okay, now that alpha, where those black lines are on our alpha map, which is this brick texture, it looks black because anywhere there's nothing, it's just going to make it black. We can go over here to our alpha, click on this little box, and it brings us up, or we can just click on it over here in our Hypershade, and it brings up the attributes for our alpha map. Alright, I'm going to expand this color balance, and here's our alpha gain, but I want to draw your attention to this alpha is luminance. If we turn this alpha illuminance on, then the alpha, the invisible areas, are going to act like a solid color. So it's going to act like it's a solid black color. If we turn that off, then I believe it's going to act like there's nothing there. Where those black lines are, where the alpha is, it's going to act like there's nothing there. So let's just test that out. Let's do another test render. And now if you look in, here's our render. If you look in there, there's no grooves in the bricks. All we have is the fractal on there, but we don't have the black lines. And the reason being is because our alpha channel is, we don't have this luminance selected, and so the areas that are invisible is it doesn't know that there's a black line there. Even though the alpha is represented as black, there's really nothing there. So Maya looks and it's like, oh, there's nothing there. There's no bump on those line areas. But if we turn this alpha as luminance, then the alpha, or the invisible areas, are acting as a solid color. So that kind of explains that. So that's how we can now get by with just using that one layer. So I hope that makes sense. Alright, let's go ahead and wrap this up. So let's just kind of play with our rendering settings. We can go here and we can change our bump depth to make it however we want to. We could add some lights and some shadows. Let's just kind of play with our, maybe turn on our final gathering. Not sure if that'll make much of a difference. I'm gonna go back into my camera, make it a white background. Maybe we'll add a quick light, directional light. Wow, my wall is really small. Alright, hit letter T. I'm gonna hit the number 7 so I can see what my light is doing. So maybe something like that. Maybe we'll make it a little bit brighter, our light. Maybe not too bright. I don't think shadows will do anything on a bump. It might on a normal map, but I don't think it's going to do much on a bump, but we'll see. Pretty sure it won't. Alright, let's do a render. Just double checking my settings here. I'm going to change this to Mitchell. I just really like Mitchell. Alright, there is our render. It's actually not bad. So it might even darken it up. Maybe it's a little too bright. We could darken it up some, and just kind of depends on the look you're getting. But you can see how we easily used it to our bump to make a nice looking realistic wall. And I think I'm going to increase the bump. Alright, and there's our wall.